hardest part of being a leader is when you're trying to lead in something, but someone might feel that you don't know how because you haven't experienced certain things yet.
I feel like having youth input will really be able to improve the program and the people that's involved in the program as well.
I think as a leader, it's good to know that what you're saying is right and on a certain accord, and what you're saying people understand.
The youth voice is something powerful that could be took and used and put and made into something so magnificent that words could barely explain it.
Good morning, everyone. It's really great to be here. My name is Karen Young. I wanted to start with a little bit of a personal welcome from me. It's exciting to see a room like this filled of adults and young people together who are really passionate about making things right for youth. Because the basis of this work really is caring. And we're going to talk a lot today about caring. And I got my start 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. It's always funny to hear my bio being read now being in my mid-40s. But I got started because an adult cared about me. And I was volunteering as a college student in one of the programs, and an adult came to me and looked at one of the flyers I created and said, "That's one of the most beautiful flyers I've ever seen." And it was the first time I can remember an adult actually taking an interest in me, where they looked me right in the eye and said, "Your work matters. What you did a good job." And it actually stayed in my heart and stayed in my mind for a long, long time. We ended up becoming really good friends. And it really launched me into the world of youth development. And Youth on Board, based in Boston, has been working all throughout the United States and all throughout actually different countries, Japan, Mexico, England, really figuring out ways to create systems and to create spaces for young people to take the lead. I'm really excited to know that 30% of the room here is filled with young people. So let's hear it for the young people who are under, yes? And I'm particularly excited to have Tina Marie with me, so I'd like to turn to her.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? I started BSAC when I was 15, just the Boston Student Advisory Council. I was actually I was a problem student. I was in danger of being suspended, and they gave me the option, like, hey, you're either going to get suspended or you're going to do this program, the Boston Student Advisory Council. And it was the first time when I went there that I was able to see a group of young people who really could articulate their thoughts about their schools and had really engaging things to say, and it was run by youth, and that was amazing to me. And I just felt like this is so refreshing to see a group of young people leading themselves, and it reaffirmed for me that we can lead ourselves and that we are very intelligent, because as young people, if we don't advocate for ourselves, no one will. And as adults, you all have so much experience that we can learn from you, so it's very important that we can be allies to each other and learn from each other, because that's where the most learning will happen. Thank you.
So we're going to model today what we're talking about, which is how do we work together as young people and adults. So we're not going to spend a lot of time, hopefully not spend a lot of time listening to Tina and myself, but actually talking to each other. We want to set it up so young people can stay central in this work and in this conversation. We're going to start out looking at why. Why is this work important? That's the first thing that we really figured out we need to really come clear on, is why do we need to do this? Why is this an important issue? The next thing we need to look at is what gets in the way. What gets in the way of us actually building relationships that are meaningful, and what gets in the way of us creating spaces for young people to really take the lead. All right, so very good. So everyone hopefully is warmed up, ready to go. This is how we do it. We are going to move into this first section of our workshop, thinking about why. Why are we doing this work? Why is it important? And to do that, we are going to consider a scenario. So we're going to imagine our schools half run by young people. So that means making decisions about things like school start time, evaluation procedures, graduation requirements, budgets. Imagine your schools, our school districts, our individual schools run half by young people, working side by side with adults. What would be really exciting about that scenario, and what would be really scary or challenging about that scenario? So let's have people grab someone that they don't know, maybe someone they just met, and let's take 5-7 minutes or so to consider that scenario.
When you're heard and you have a voice, that means someone is at the other end and they're listening. So I believe when the youth have a voice, that means it's a two-way situation. They're talking and there's someone to listen, and they're also able to listen to who's listening to them. Yeah.
Without youth, you can't really have a youth organization. Without the youth input, you wouldn't really know what the youth need. Youth involvement makes the youth feel comfortable, and they begin to trust this youth organization because there is youth involved.
That's a good point. I think that they would also say they would want more organizations, because I know that when I was in school, I went to the school in Detroit, we had a lot more organizations, and because of funding, they've been cut. So if we let schools run organizations, I think that they would start some of those back up. And
what kind of stuff?
like even sports. Like when I was in school, there was like 5 different sports. Now it's limited to like just football or basketball, when there was softball, soccer. You know, I was even on a math team. So just a lot more different organizations and clubs to keep everyone interested versus those that like athletics.
I wonder how much of that is specific to urban schools versus a
You're
suburban
right,
school.
it's a difference.
I bet we've got 30 different team activities.
So we are going to report out. So we want to hear what people came up with. First, we're going to start with what was challenging or what was scary about the idea of young people taking over and ruling their schools or having half control with adults.
So I think what was a little nervous wrecking for me is that I got paired with the superintendent of a school system who had a very different view of some things, but we came to some agreements. But he made me think about some things like, well, could a 5-year-old run their own school? And I'm like, oh, that's a hard question, but I think that they could suggest some new ways, or, you know, to make their classes more interesting. So it was a really good conversation between the two of us.
We feared that as youth, the decision-making process may involve more of what's popular, and that can be contrary to what's really beneficial to the school.
The one thing that we thought would be a challenge would be the discipline and the what you want versus what's good.
It's really interesting to hear things like this because often it's the young people that probably set the harshest rules or harshest punishments when it comes to actually asking them what they think should be the consequence for being late. So it's interesting, kind of the things that we fear. Love to hear others. Yeah.
One of the things that we said that may be scary was that the youth not having enough experience.
Working with youth and working in schools, that's a lot of what we heard as far as myself with our youth council when we met with like the superintendent or like the head of the schools. They're like, oh, you guys don't have enough experience, you can't. But it's like we're the ones that are like in the class and we know what works for us better than anybody will. I think what works as far as youth-adult partnerships is that youth can be honest and be like, hey, you know, we think we can do this. And just by an adult saying, you know what, we don't think you all have enough experience, that's a step forward. You're being honest about how you feel, and you're able to work through that together. So it's always important to be committed to keeping that dialogue open. Any other person?
We talked about the lack of respect that the students may experience from the adults because they're youth. So we believe that the youth's opinion, their opinions are valuable, and that they know when they're being engaged, they know when things are being impactful to them. So if they speak their voice and speak their opinion and it's not respected, then that could be a challenge moving forward. And also the ability, just the connectivity going both ways, understanding the information being presented on levels that are appropriate for youth as well as adults.
Did anybody else have anything for what's scary? Okay.
I think a lot of times when we're trying to get youth involved, especially in something like the schools, what might happen is we would look to students that are maybe on, honor society, maybe very successful students, and if they're the ones, trying to make the changes and deciding what's going on, well, those are the students that are already successful. They don't really need the change. So what would be scary is if we're only reaching out to those, we might not really be making the changes, that are necessary. So
what's scary is that top-down decisions are easy, collaborative decisions are hard. So it's hard work on our part, the administrators, the adults, letting go and being collaborators with our youth.
Thank you. So would people like to share what was exciting?
What is exciting, especially for our organization, because we teach youth to be community and school activists, is seeing that they have ideas and they're able to explain them clearly, and they're able to facilitate meetings, and they're able to have these traditionally adult conversations to talk to their peers and to engage with their peers. And so I think the exciting piece in that is them creating the space to make the change that they envision, and not necessarily what's in textbooks or what's been done in the past, but innovative ideas. And I really believe in this type of work. So,
students and people connect with things that they create. In that connection, they're able to follow through. They tend to hold each other accountable. They tend to respect the process more because they were there from the start. And so because of that, the connection is greater. And as a result, you'll typically see a better response, a better overall success in whatever it was that was being created. And you'll also find that if for whatever reason it doesn't work, the mindset changes from it's a problem, to how can we correct it? So you move to being very solution-oriented.
One thing that we found really exciting is the fact that youth think outside the box, and that a lot of their ideas would be really different. And also as adults, we sometimes just get stuck into we know the system, it is how it's supposed to be, and these are the rules, and we just go with that. And youth have no box, they have no walls. They don't just rebrand like we do sometimes. And so the most exciting thing is that their ideas are new and fresh, and even if as adults we maybe have to help them figure out how to get them done, at least it's something different, and that's really useful.
Just to comment on your point, I think adults have to face the dynamics, and I don't want to give up my power to young people, so I think a lot of that has to do with that conversation as far as young people thinking out of the box. So thank you so much.
One of the things that was exciting with my conversation was just the idea that we can do, or we can kind of work with some of those really challenging issues that children face in school, like, suspensions, expulsions, like maybe changing some of those things and doing something that's more productive with their time, so they're not like sitting home just, wasting their brain cells. And we just talked about some of those other controversial topics that, maybe like making schools more creative and integrative, and having more clubs, and just things that matter to youth that we say, well, there's not enough money for it, but they would find a way to get the money. They would, fundraise or whatever, because those things are important to them, and it makes them better adults. So we talked about it.
Anyone else?
Hi there. I think in addition to everything else that we've been talking about what's exciting is just the partnership that could develop between the youth and the adults in schools, because if you think about it, youth and adults that work in schools spend a whole lot of time there. So if they can form a partnership and kind of better, make peace with each other sort of thing, it could be really, really exciting for the curriculum and just the school day in general.
Okay, any last comments? Anybody? Okay, so I want to direct people in their booklets to page 3, and it's titled Why Young People Should Be Decision Makers. And I'll quickly just point out a few. Number 1, it's about the bottom line. Involving youth in decision making saves time, energy, and money. Simply put, young people know what works for young people, and that knowledge can work for your organization. And I think it's really important that we understand and own that young people know what works for them. It's humbling for both people, because adults can share, what their concerns could be around young people having power, or around young people sharing power with them, and talk about, maybe adults just really want to hold power. That could be something. Like, as an adult, you might feel like, I should have power. And you can be honest with young people and say that. Because as young people, we've been talked to and talked to and talked to. So as we get older, we're like, no, now we're an adult. I can talk to you. Sometimes we do things to others that were done to us subconsciously without realizing that. So just being aware of that is very helpful. It's also about effectiveness. Involving young youth in decision-making is a successful approach to youth development and education. Adults become better teachers, mentors, and coaches. Organizations meet community needs more effectively, and government agencies engage more citizens more effectively. It's about personal development. Involving youth in decision-making builds the leadership skills young people need today and in the future. So it's very important for for me personally as a young person to have adults in my life that encouraged me and said, you know, you can do this, you're intelligent, believe in your thinking, that really helps you develop as an adult to know that what you think about things is proper, because I think as young people it's really hard. I think sometimes we really do think we don't know anything, and I think that's because that's like a message that's in our brains a lot from school or what have you. So I think it's very important about fighting for each other and coming from a place of love. That's my favorite word. Coming from a place of love and thinking like, these are my young people in my schools, in my community, and I want them to be the best that they can be. And it's about community development. Involving youth in decision-making creates practical avenues for effective planning, assessment, and policy-making through communities. Young people provide powerful insight and energy in environmental, social, economic, and educational growth for community planners. Like a lot of people have said, young people really have vibrant ideas and really like to make things exciting. So I think it's important that with young people and adults partnering with each other, that can happen, and it can help communities be closer to each other and have really honest conversations about where they would like to see things go in their communities or in their schools. I would also like to point people to page 6. And this is just an opportunity for everyone to think about the ways that they involve youth in their lives. So starting from the right, youth and adults have opportunities to share decisions and make power equally. So these are youth-led organizations where the youth decide what's worked on, the youth decide the campaigns and where things will go. And then there are resources where youth help adults in planning, implementing, and evaluating work. So this could be, for example, if the school administration decides to have a focus group and they want to know what you think about the food or something, and they want to get ideas, youth don't really have a decision in the process, but you're getting feedback from them. There are also recipients. Adults determine needs, prescribe remedies, implement solutions, and evaluate outcomes with little youth input, but in the youth's best interest. So this is a lot of what happens at schools, like with teachers and principals and faculty. They make decisions, and they're in the best interest of the youth, but youth really don't have much of a say. And then there's objects where adults exercise arbitrary and near total control over youth. And there could be other examples. It's situational. You can apply it to different things, but I wanted to point that out for everyone. Okay?
Good.
Thank you.
All right. So I think one thing that's really important to remember here is that we are talking about partnerships. And so one of the things that came up around, what's scary, and we use that language on purpose. We try to say scary or what's your worst nightmare about this situation, because we do need to have those honest conversations that Tina was talking about to really get out what's worrisome for people. What are the real, issues that people, are really challenged by in terms of thinking about this? When you're talking about working side by side with maybe young people as young as 5, like what decisions really should we be making together? And I think that, the key thing here is to think, and to have judgment and to really think about the situation. There is no one cookie cutter model for this. There's no one right answer. It really is based on what the situation is, how much resource there is in the room in terms of adults willing to listen, or the young people willing to participate. And it's really, this isn't an exact science. The other thing is we, look at what's exciting because we really do want to look at what's possible. And building and community buy-in is one of the first things that you need to do in your organizations in order to make this work. Sometimes it's the one youth worker or the one teacher or the one, person on staff that really is gung-ho about it, but there are a lot of reservations that other people in the room might have. And so having honest conversations is really key. And so this exercise, is an exercise that you can take back to do with your staff or do with young people in the room to actually ask them. Ask people. That's the first thing you need to do is what do people think about this? I should also say that all the exercises that are in our books and in this packet, you're completely welcome to photocopy, change, edit, use as you see fit. We really created these exercises and these worksheets for you to use them. We're going to shift a little bit now, and we're going to talk about the key thing that we found as being one of the most important thing when thinking about youth-adult partnerships, and that has to do with addressing age dynamics. So over the past years, we've worked over and over again with organizations, figuring out how do we set it up? What model should we use? What training do young people need? How much staffing does it take? How do we recruit the right young people? How do we get to the young people that have been pushed out and not just have the star students? But the thing that it came down to over and over again was relationships. And do young people feel welcome? And do adults feel like they're, open and ready and to hear what they have to say? There are stereotypes and there are negative messages about younger people and about older people. And we have to talk about ageism. Just like we can't be shy to talk about race or class or gender, we also have to talk about age. And for some of our organizations, starting with the board of directors, which is where we started 20 years ago, is the last place you want to start with involving young people. Particularly when you look at them, maybe boards meeting at 7:30 in the morning and being really formal in nature. It's not a great place to start. You might want to start someplace like having a youth committee or youth caucus that meets after school or on Saturdays, when adults that have families may not be able to meet, but is a good place to start with getting young people involved. We need to actually think about how the meetings are run. We need to think about how things are set up and what's going to work for young people and for youth culture. So to do that, we always like to have everyone talk about what it was like to be a teen. Now, for some of you, the teen years were your most favorite years in the world. How many of you had great teen years? You had great teachers, great coaches, great mentors. That's great. Some of us, however, the teen years were like the worst years. They were awful. You felt, anyone dare to raise their hand around here? Yeah, some of us, right? Some of us, it was hard. We didn't have many friends. We weren't sure we liked ourselves. We didn't know if there was an adult out there that cared. We might have, engaged in self-destructive behavior in some way. So I think it's important for us just to take a moment and think about our teen years. And so we have an exercise here on page 5 called Teen Years Exercise. And then take a moment to review these questions. And if you are young, you can talk about your years now. And if you're not in your teen years, you can talk about, any particular age back then. But it's an important time for us to kind of think back personally, like what were the things that we were personally thinking about, dealing with, and just let's take about 15 minutes here and talk about what it was like. So everyone, we'll have these be self-facilitated, so say your name, your organizations, where you're from, and then answer a question or two, if you dare, about your teen years.
When I was in high school, I remember writing an article for the school newspaper about how in art class you couldn't paint nude paintings. And I remember being like, this is crazy, that's art, you go to a museum, like that's all you see, why can't you do this in high school, And I remember sitting down with the principal and the art teacher and them saying they were like gonna sue me for slander because I wrote this article in the newspaper, and like I would understand more when I was an adult about like why it's wrong for teenagers to be able to paint like nude paintings in art class. And so I just remember thinking like, this is crazy, why are you saying that? Like I don't know better because I'm 17, So I think that was something like the adult versus teen issue that sticks out in my head about high school a lot.
This particular exercise is really fun to do with half young people and half adults. Sometimes as adults we get scared to reveal parts of our personal life. We're not sure if it's appropriate. We're not sure how much we want to reveal. We don't know how much we want them to know because we might be in a position of authority. But I think that it's important in order to build relationships that really feel sincere and genuine, that we actually do challenge ourselves to get close. I know we all have boundaries and we all have to figure that out, but I think that we can't underestimate as adults how important it is to share who we are. It's not about like I was your age and I know better, but it's about this is what I experienced too, and the young people get to share as well. So I'd love to hear some comments from people, just like what was it like to do this exercise? Can you imagine doing this exercise with your organization? Over here? Okay.
I think that the most value in the questions come from the things that are difficult to talk about, right? Mean things someone has done to you, your crush that you had, or things you didn't understand as a teenager. For me, being a teenager was full of, just opposite, conflicting, very strong emotions, and it's difficult to talk about those things. Some of them are embarrassing, or some of them just didn't, I couldn't make sense of them. You're saying when you expose yourself that people see you as a real person, and I think these are the kind of things that, help other people see your struggles and your character, basically.
Great, thank you. How about someone else? Great.
Level of disclosure is something that I struggle a lot with working with youth, and kind of figuring out what is and is not appropriate to talk about, and especially I think a lot of times youth have a lot of questions, and it's hard to know how far to go with them, which ones to answer, which ones to not answer, which ones are more important to answer for whatever reason. And so I think that this gives kind of a structured way to address some things that might come up in a really appropriate way, and kind of guides a level of disclosure that would seem appropriate.
It's great. Okay, over here.
We all just kind of went around and shared our experiences, and it was such a diverse and wealth of experiences that we've had. One of the things that we did talk about, though, was that though times have changed so much, there's still some things that are fundamentally the same, just about being a teenager, and these questions really lifted them out. Things like having a crush, and just the language, it was the same, having a best friend, those kinds of experiences. And then the fundamental things needs that we all have for caring relationships, whether we grew up in the 70s or, in, what is it now, 2013. So just some of the things that we have in common, and this was a great exercise to lift those out.
How would you characterize your teen years? What would you say? We can just shout some things out. What were they? Fun, yep. Irresponsible? Irresponsible, yep. What else? Memorable, contentious, enlightened? Yep. All right, so we're going to actually delve into this a little bit deeper, and I'm going to ask you, some of you bold, courageous people, who might want to do a role play to help demonstrate some of the things that happen in our teen years. Can I get 4 volunteers that might be interested in doing a role play in front of everyone? Bold, I know, I'm asking a lot, but I think we can do it. All right, so if we can go in the hallway, actually, with me. Take your packet. Okay, so this is a scenario where Shauna has a bad day at school. She just broke up with her boyfriend. Her dad, who's divorced, has no idea what Shauna's crying about, because he doesn't really believe that she could really be in love, because who can be in love at the age of 15, right? That's just puppy love. So obviously these characters are to get people laughing and kind of exaggerate some scenarios here. But Dad had a real divorce, so he knows what real love is about. And then of course there is the girlfriend of Dad, who actually knows kind of like that it's important to listen to young people. So, offers her phone number and says, let's go out to ice cream, something like that. All right, scenario number 2, are you ready? Shauna comes home after a rotten day at school. Shauna, who's Shauna? Shauna. She and Todd have been going out for 5 months now, and he just called it off. Bill, her dad, who's Bill? Bill notices Shauna looks down, but when he finds out the problem, he completely dismisses Shauna's hurt over the breakup. He asks if because she's young, her feelings aren't real. All right, let's give it a hand for role play number 2.
Hi.
Hi, Shauna.
Hi.
Oh, God, here we go again. How was your day?
Fine. Yeah, fine.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Sounds like a great day.
Yeah. Do you care?
Okay, what happened?
So Todd and I broke up.
Oh, the
been really
kid-
important. Yeah, been really
The kid
important.
with the weird hairdo?
Yeah.
I didn't
yeah.
like it. I'm just so glad that it's over.
Well, yeah, it's just the fact is that Todd is really the only person that I actually had to talk to. I just feel sort of, alone.
You act like it's the end of the world. Problems, you want to talk about problems? Talk about that alimony payment that I'm paying your mother. Talk about the child support, and you're living here with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just what always seems to happen is when something's going on in my life, it just really quickly turns about your life and what's happening with you. I guess with you and Mom, it didn't work out. And maybe that's because you never actually did talk to her. So now here I am. I had somebody I could talk to, and now you're just like dismissing that as like just who cares? Like I'm just a kid. And it doesn't matter.
Shauna, stop with the dramatics.
No.
What's gonna come next? The tears, the stomping out the room?
You know what, Bill?
Just-
I could really use a drink of water. So would you mind getting me some water? Listen, Shauna, I know you're going through a lot right now. I didn't want to say anything in front of your dad, but if you want to talk, here's my number, and you just give me a call, okay? I understand. Your dad, I know he really doesn't understand these things.
Oh, Terry, I appreciate that, but really, you're just my dad's girlfriend. I'm not really sure what. I mean, it's nice, but I don't really feel like you're part of my life at all. So I'm trying to find somebody who actually cares, sort of knows who I am and what I'm doing. So I mean, again, that's nice of you, but
Well, I know Todd was important, so if you want to talk, I'm here, okay?
well, thanks.
Oh, give him a hand. That was pretty funny. You make a pretty good Shauna, I have to say. All right, so what did people see in that role play? Yes, over here.
The total disregard of her feelings and how it was impacting her, which, as an observer, she was really upset. So there was a total disregard for her feelings.
Yeah. Over here.
You know what was interesting to me is we saw 3 adults completely understanding how it felt to be a teenager. So it was great that an older man could understand the young girl's feelings. You know, he said we played it so well, but we can only play things that we relate to or we've seen before. So it was so cool to not watch kids play that, but adults play that and be able to improvise the real feelings. And so for young people in the room to go, we've been through it. We get it too. And I think that was a nice bridging of adults playing young people, made the young people laugh.
Yep.
That was cool.
Yep, that's great. We wrote these role plays to really exaggerate some characters, and sometimes they're not that exaggerated, but young people often feel like their feelings and their thoughts are dismissed or not important. And we all have been through that. That's the thing. We've all been through that. And as we get older and we become allies to young people, we still have those situations and those recordings and those experiences in our mind. And so sometimes we unawarely act them out, even though we don't mean to. But these are opportunities for us to kind of laugh at these scenarios, but also to really take a look at our own behavior.
So thank you, everyone. I want to give everyone a round of
Yes.
applause again.
A minute or two.
So at this time, I would like to ask the audience, how many people know of the word adultism? How many people have heard the word? So can some people who have not heard the word think about, what do you think adultism means?
Is that like, I think it seems like that would be like a default position that you take as a so-called adult that supersedes anything that a young person may have to offer or know?
It's old people, but more than that, it's old people that forgot that they were ever young people.
I think it's where the adults automatically think that kids or young people don't have any say or don't have any type of nothing. They just automatically think they're supposed to take charge and never listen to the child. Like a mother might do with a daughter or a father might do with a son. You know, they never listen to the child. I think that's what adultism? Yeah, I think that's what it is.
We're always thinking because we have more experience, therefore we must know more.
People aren't thought of as a complete or competent person until they reach a certain age.
That's great.
Well, I think if it's one of the isms, it's based in power. So it's the power of adult versus the power of youth.
I actually think it's a two-step process. I think it's an adult thinking they have all the answers and a youth expecting that response from the adult. Kind of where the whole don't trust anybody over 30 came from. Your expectations of, well, I'm going to ask this question, but I know what it's going to be, and the adult will fall right into that and give you exactly what that means.
So adultism really means a negative stereotype of young people. That is the basic meaning of adultism, but you can frame it many ways. And these are some really great examples that you can look to in your own lives to see adultism taking place. So example one, if there's a meeting going on and the young person, their name and their age is written up, like Maria age 17 rather than Maria Ortiz. It's great to show that there's a young person, but like you would never write Jim age 54. You know? Example 3, asking young people, do they understand something in a condescending way, or taking every few seconds to check in, like, do you understand, do you get that, do you get that? Young people tend to shut down when that takes place. Assuming young people won't be able to understand a topic or concept rather than taking the time to explain it to them. So a lot of times, not even as adults, but just as human beings, like if something seems like it could be too complicated, you kind of just don't go there. But in developing relationships with young people, you have to say, you know, I wasn't sure if you might get this, or would like me to explain it to you. Taking that time is really important. Asking young people to handle only small or menial tasks, that is so annoying. I remember in meetings, like someone would say, oh, do you want to like just organize the food? Like, no, I don't. Like things like that, like just being aware of what you ask young people to do, and is it really challenging or is it something easy? And also being surprised when a young person says something intelligent, when they are dressed appropriately or when they are well organized. Comments like, you're so smart, I can't believe you're only 15. That is very adultist, and it can, even if you think you're being positive, it can actually be very negative. Especially if there's other young people around, it can definitely bring them down. Especially for young people, when we have adults in our lives who say things negative or say, oh, you're young, you don't do this or you don't get that, we're going to start to feel that way about ourselves. And I think that's very important to realize that the messages that come across, because young people, as you all did, internalize those things. So these are just some ways to think about what adultism is, and this is actually, it's very important to know and see what adultism is, because it helps us do our work better together, to know like, okay, I did that, that was adultist. Being able to identify it will help you grow as an adult ally and help you develop relationships with young people.
Great. Yes, well said. And I think one thing that's really important to remember is that we're all here to undo adultism. This can easily get into an us versus them, and there's good adults and bad adults, and I think that that's dangerous, and I don't think that's really helpful, actually. We have to understand how this mechanism works and how we were all faced with these issues as young people, and that we now as adults have these unawarenesses that we need to become aware of, and we need to help each other figure out how to become aware of them so that we can change our behavior and we can create conditions so that young people can really thrive. And I do think there is a power dynamic that we have to acknowledge as well here. That's just, as adults, we have control, and we get to make the final decision, and we get to control budgets, and we get to have the final say. And we can't underestimate how that power can intimidate, or can even have young people feel like they don't matter, that what they say doesn't matter. And that's particularly why, as adult allies, we need to figure out how to be extra welcoming. Extra welcoming, reaffirming, reassuring, constantly. So I can't really say much more than that. Being in this room for this whole day was such an honor. So I would like to turn it over to Matthew to say thank you, but I would like to can we just end with one more victory clap, maybe starting a little bit slower, because I do particularly love that particular clap.
My biggest takeaway today with this program is knowing that there are youth out there who go through the same problems that I go through, and they also they want to be heard as well, and knowing that there's different organizations that help youth to have a youth voice, and that I'm not alone out here, and that everybody goes through the same thing and that I go through, and there's people like me, and I know them now, and I'm able to communicate with them, so we can build connections and help youth all over the world if we want to have a voice in today's society.
Can we hear it one more time for Karen and Tina Marie? Thank you so much.